I'm Anna Wilson. I'm a Principal Consultant of Wetland Centres at WWT, and I'm speaking with Gordon Lescinsky from Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre in Australia. And this is a recorded conversation for the 2022 WELI webinar. Gordon, it's really fantastic to speak with you today. It'd be great if you could just start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre.
Okay, well, I'm a long-time nature lover, and I'm also a long-time resident of the western suburbs of Melbourne. And I'm the team leader for centre development for our community group, which we call the Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre. And so we do lots of things. I lead nature walks in the wetlands and teach people how to identify salt marsh plants, but I'm also working on our main mission, our main vision, which is to build a wetland centre building. So we're in the west of Melbourne, as I said, and Melbourne is situated on a large bay called Port Phillip Bay. And in the west, there's an area of hundreds of hectares of undeveloped coastline and creeks and grasslands and wetlands, which now lie within the urban footprint of Melbourne. But it is part of one of Australia's Ramsar listed wetlands. And listed for several reasons, but it's because largely because it's host to a number of species of water birds and particularly migratory shorebirds. So we're at the southern end of the East Asian Australasian flyway, so about as far south as migratory birds can fly, almost. Mm-hmm. And the Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre teaches people to appreciate nature and to appreciate this area in a nutshell.
Sounds fantastic. So I think you're probably in a similar position to quite a lot of WELI members, and we get quite a lot of inquiries at WWT, particularly through our consultancy. So people who want to either develop new wetland centres or new facilities for their visitors. So it's really great to have you here talking about your experience, because this is a process you've started and you're very much underway with. So I mean, it'd be great to start by saying sort of what's the vision for the Wetland Centre when this project is finished.
Okay, well, so we've got a mission statement, which is to connect people with nature. So that's what it's all about. And then we have a vision of doing it by building a wetland centre, because, and this would be in common with other Wetlands Link members. It's would be to help the community visit the wetlands, experience them more deeply, learn about them, get involved to help protect them. And that's the reason why Ramsar Convention and Wetlands Link International believe in building wetland centers. So we've just bought into that vision. We really do believe that is the way to connect people with nature and get those outcomes.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be really great for your communities there, and that was going to be one of my next questions, was just sort of who are the intended audiences for the centre, who are you doing it for and hoping that will come and use the new facilities? Okay,
well, look, for the benefit of this audience, I'd just point out that it's for any visitor from anywhere in the world, from any culture, and it's even for people who follow us in other countries who will never get a chance to visit, because that's one of the interesting things about wetland centers. We have other partner wetland centers on the flyway, but really in the main, it is for the local community. Mm-hmm. So it's a big urban area, and it's for the people of the western suburbs. First of all, because they're the ones who will have ample opportunity to visit it, and then looking at the whole community, there's a special attention for people who don't often get a chance to be in nature or go, trek mm-hmm. in nature, like people with limited mobility, and young children, like, really young children and their families, but also students of all ages. But just basically anybody in the community. It's like a community center in its nature.
Fantastic. And sort of just following on from that, does the community have much engagement or opportunities to engage with the wetlands as they are at the moment, or will this be sort of quite new, I guess, for them?
Well, that's a really good question. So the open space is there, but it's not. I wouldn't say that it's activated, and I wouldn't say people appreciate it. We've got basically a world-class conservation area and a national park that is adjacent to suburbs where the people who are buying homes in those suburbs don't even really realize what they're next to. And the area is accessible, but there aren't necessarily the facilities. And when you learn about what the community really looks for when they go out, there's a lot of things that people want to make them feel comfortable exploring an area. They want certain kinds of paths and amenities, and they would love to know that there's actually somebody on duty at the Wetland Center, and all these things will make a difference to a certain type of visitor. And then when it comes to like people who can't really travel very far, like really elderly people or people who have to travel in wheelchairs, they have really limited ability to get into these areas in the West, and generally anywhere you go, that would be the case. So this is our big open space. For the West, it's our largest open space. It's actually one of the largest open spaces in Melbourne.
Mm. I know it's a really good way of putting it, that the sort of the wetlands are there, but they're not yet activated for their audiences. I really like that. That's great. So just a little bit more background to the project. Sort of where did it start, and how far along in your planning have you got?
Well, it's the brainchild of Dr. Marilyn Olive, who's an environmental scientist, who's always been really passionate about the concept of connecting people with nature, hence our mission statement. So Marilyn started this project several years ago and built support for it in the local community and attracted a keen group of people. So we got to the point where we incorporated. And also the group has been very successful at finding partner organizations who share the vision or who will take an interest in the Wetland Center. And I think we've come a long way, and there's still a long way to go. The turning point has been, I think, when we approached the local council to lend its support. So now we have a really strong partnership with council. And thanks to them, we've been able to enter some of the steps which are really difficult for some organizations. Your feasibility study, that's behind us. Some of the other, studies that you have to do, and we now have a concept design. So the building has been designed by architects, not to the point where it could actually, we call it shovel ready in Australia, where we could take funds tomorrow and put out contracts. We're not to that point, but we're at the point where you can show people a really brilliant design and they can see what it looks like, and we can take it to funding bodies and say, look, it's been really well thought out. This is what it's going to be like.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a really big milestone to get to, isn't it? That's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. It feels great, but on the other hand, it feels scary.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I was really I was lucky at the end of 2021 to attend a webinar with the designers and the architects that worked on Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre, and they spoke of the project, and particularly they talked about the biophilic design, which means that the design is sort of intrinsically connected to nature, which was really interesting. So I just wanted to ask a little bit more about that sort of design process, whether you could sort of introduce it for us, just tell us a little bit about how the process was.
Oh, well, look, I think the process was brilliant to be part of. And I think that the biophilic design principles are also brilliant. So you're referring to, well, first of all, we worked with Dr. Phil Roos of Deakin University Live Smart Lab. So he would have been the one that who would have introduced the seminar, and then the architects, Grimshaw, who was our principal architect, in partnership with McGregor Coxall and Greenaway Architects. So that's the partnership, and they completely were aligned with it, and it came second nature to them. The idea behind the biophilic framework is it's not going to be, it might sound really a bit mysterious to some people, but I think it would actually make perfect sense to people who are, interested in building wetland centers, because we all believe that being in nature is good for us, good for our well-being. It's actually calming and can lead to physiological benefits. But sometimes being in a modern building, not so beneficial. So why build a nature center that's actually at odds with a natural setting that you're attracting people to visit? And the biophilic principles, they help guide a project. So the project can capture all the opportunities to make a building really reflect the things in nature that people respond to. And you look at the best nature centers, national park facilities, these kinds of buildings that have come before, and they tend to instinctively incorporate biophilic principles, and that's what we'd all like to emulate. So we actually mandated that we just use the framework so that we have a way of actually measuring whether we're achieving that.
Fantastic. And so sort of one of the things to really get right in this sort of project is having like a really clear brief when working with sort of architects or designers on any project, really, from sort of large ones like this to small ones, and sort of how prescriptive were you with what you set out for them, and how much sort of creative freedom did you give the people you worked with to design your centre?
Okay, well, so the brief came out of we spent almost a year on the brief, and that also was facilitated by Phil Roos from Deakin University, and
Right.
He is the one that brought a lot of the things into it. So, for example, the biophilic framework comes from his research, and we really were very open in terms of design, but still the brief is really constraining because we've got so many users in mind and so many potential uses, and then there's all these environmental standards that and impacts that we're trying to actually mitigate. And then it's also very aspirational because we actually specifically called for a biophilic framework, and we specifically said that the building needs to align with indigenous culture, values of traditional owners, and we specifically said that it has to be very, it has to protect nature and even restore nature. So I wouldn't call it prescriptive because we didn't know what we were going to get, but it's actually very challenging. But then it turns out that we got exceptional submissions to the architectural tender process. So it was like just challenging enough to attract those world-class architecture firms that really thrive on a challenge. So
that's great.
Yep.
So so tell us a little bit more about the sort of the concept for the new centre then. What sort of things will it include for the different visitors that it will have?
Okay. Well, it is the core of it is it's like a community space. So there is actually very generic space, rooms that are large enough to be used for lots of different purposes. Like they will spend time as classrooms for class trips. They may spend time as just lounges for senior citizen centers to come and visit. And then it's got lots of satellite features so that it can accommodate a lot of uses, and you can also use it as a base from which to explore. So there will be a cafe, and it will actually be like a bike cafe because we're on a very popular bike trail.
Okay.
There will be nature play, which is playgrounds that kind of connect the children to nature instead of just, climbing on big plastic things. There will be features about the center, and a lot of this is still needs to be designed and needs to be worked out with the community, but we want it to be an indigenous landscape so that there are things around that help you understand what the landscape was like before the arrival of Europeans, and to understand things about the landscape that would have been really significant to the traditional owners. When we talk about all abilities, the landscape architect has designed a concept of a trail network, but you could actually go on the trails and take a really short walk. Like you could maybe just walk a few meters and that's your walk, but then there'll be longer walks and all these different distances, and trails that are not paved. Like they won't be normal pavement, but they will still be accessible for wheelchairs.
Right.
And little things like what we call yarning circles, which is an indigenous cultural concept, but it's just a little place where you can stop in the landscape and just sit down and talk. And wildlife viewing, and then as part of it, there's actually a facility, an educational facility. So there'll be laboratories. So there's classroom space, but then these will actually be laboratories where you could actually do university level research, and they'll be accessible to the community, but they'll actually be there for our university partners to use whenever they need to for whatever projects they want, so that we can have really important research happening in the nearby wetlands, because that's an important part of it's an important part of our business model, number one, and it's actually an important way of contributing to the long-term flourishing of those wetlands.
That sounds great. It sounds like it's got lots of really really important sort of flexibility built into the space as well, so that the centre can grow and sort of organically become what it will do in the future. And so that sounds really fantastic. Have you what sort of reactions from communities and audiences have you had to the concepts and the designs?
Well, we started promoting the idea quite a few years ago, and we've had a process of community engagement where we ask people what they think, and I would say that the reaction is actually quite positive. We're developing a park which is adjacent to the natural areas, the conservation areas, but the area that we're developing actually used to be a rubbish tip 25 years ago. So it's had a long history, and the community has never seen very much there. Now it's a space that people love because it's an open space, and you can go and go through to the coast. But where we are developing it, it actually would be a great new feature for the community. It would be unlike what the local neighborhood has had. It'll be pretty unique in the Melbourne area, and I think people appreciate that, and the reception sometimes is more positive than I would have expected. We also have had a special stream of input from the traditional owners. So the center will be on the traditional lands of the Bunurong people, and there are also connections to other indigenous groups. So we, with the help of Green Shoots Consulting, which was organized by the architect Grimshaw, we sought input from the Bunurong on how the development could stay aligned with their values, and how it could incorporate interpretation and activities that they would like to see. And we were actually very pleased with the with that process, because we found out that we were envisioning something that was really aligned with what they would want to happen, and they were making suggestions that were the exact kind of things that we wanted to incorporate. So, you know, your traditional owners think that it's very important to plant indigenous species and try to protect the natural environment and communicate to visitors the things that were significant there before it got so incredibly changed by European settlement. And it's been very very collaborative and very positive, I think.
That's fantastic. That's really good to hear. Yeah, that really is good. So I mean, it's interesting that it's on the site of what had been a rubbish tip as well. So you're actually, are you creating new habitat as part of that, or are you just creating sort of I guess recreational space that would link to and send people in the direction of the existing wetlands?
Well, yeah, it's hard to describe it in detail, but I'll just try to sort of conceptually. We are suburban but not urban, and it getting more developed all the time. And then the coast is actually important conservation land, and then it's kind of layered. So it's like a transition zone, and so what we will be doing is developing an area that is basically brownfields, but we will be near to conservation areas, and then there's other zones in between. So like I said, it's layered, and the trick is to work with those layers so that you're directing recreation into zones where the land managers are managing for recreation. And so the organizations managing the land are the local council and the state government. And then right where we build the center, instead of just having it sitting in the middle of an old paddock, we have a vision of creating a wetlands right at the doorstep. And this would be not a huge billabong or a big lake, but just what we call an ephemeral wetlands, because what you would have had in the area 200 years ago is you would have had coastal salt marsh along the shore of the bay, and then inland you would have had ephemeral wetlands. So that is something which is actually, it can be created with stormwater harvesting, but and it shouldn't be. It'll be quite challenging, but not it won't be impossible technically, and it'll be a little bit novel because we do have created wetlands in the Melbourne area, but nobody's actually tried to create one that's very evocative of what an original ephemeral wetland would have been like. So that would be just an area that's, a habitat for frogs and dragonflies and native vegetation, and just kind of flooded in the winter and starting to dry out in the warmer weather. Something like that, and that would be our showcase. And then all the new paths that I was talking about will be paths in that wetlands area. Fantastic.
Yeah. That sounds good. So that's your first layer of introduction to the wetlands as well, and then people can explore further afield if they want to. That sounds really brilliant. It's such a great project, and so thank you so much for telling us about it. We're probably running out of time a little bit now, but just to finish, sort of what's next for Hobsons Bay? What are your next steps in your project?
Okay, well, hopefully soon we can announce, have a really good announcement, like the first round of funding has materialized. No matter what the time frame is, we are in it for the long haul, and we're an organization that is doing things all the time anyway. So we are doing walks and workshops and citizen science and conservation projects, and they keep going, and we just have to pace ourselves, because there's a lot of learning to be done. So all of those of us who are active in the organization, we're just learning all the time. And we're getting to the point where we need to learn more about government policy and fundraising and stormwater harvesting and green prescriptions and blue carbon. And so we will just grow probably organically and try to turn over that big milestone of being able to some cornerstone funding.
Fantastic. So where is your funding coming from for the Wetland Centre so far?
Okay, so it will come from a variety of sources. So it'll be like multiple layers of government and probably some corporate and philanthropic. So it's a project which is aligned with a number of things that government is interested in, because it's a conservation project, but it's also a community health project, very much. And so there are a number of different of avenues that we're basically kind of pursuing all at once.
Fantastic. Well, I could ask so many more questions about it, but we probably should leave it there. But if people want to find more or follow your story or see how things develop over the next year or so, where can people find out more about you?
Okay. So if you're searching for us, search for Hobsons Bay Wetland Centre, and you will find us on Instagram and Facebook, and then our website's hobsonsbaywetlandcentre.org.au.
Fantastic. Well, it's been really, really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving up your time for this webinar and for this little chat.
Well, thank you.
And I wish you the best of luck. I really look forward to seeing it develop and hopefully open